Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're going beyond just money.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at the heart of giving, and I'm really excited about this one. Giving of our time, talents, all that.
Right.
So, our source material today comes from a sermon from the Flame Church.
Okay.
And honestly, I went in expecting the typical give to the church kind of message.
Right.
And I was really surprised because this sermon unpacks giving as a deep spiritual principle.
Interesting.
So I'm excited to dig into that with you today.
Well, it's interesting you say that because that's actually kind of where they start the sermon.
Really?
They look at giving as a response.
Okay.
And the example they use is the Israelites building the tabernacle in Exodus.
Okay, got it.
And they point out how the Israelites were giving not just money,
Uh-huh.
they offered jewelry, fabrics, skills, even their labor.
Right.
It's like a wholehearted response to God's blessings.
Yeah, so it wasn't just about, like, here's my 10%, check that box, and I'm done.
Right, exactly.
It was really recognizing all the good they'd been given and wanting to respond to that.
Yeah, it's like you were saying, it's not just about the money, right?
Yeah.
It's about recognizing what you've received and giving back from that place of gratitude.
And it's like, it makes me think about, like when someone does something nice for you
Uh-huh.
and you just have this like natural instinct to want to reciprocate that kindness.
Right.
Have you ever felt that?
Oh, absolutely. And there's actually a psychological basis for that.
Really?
Yeah. Studies have shown that even when we receive unexpected gifts,
Hmm.
we feel this natural urge to give back in some way.
That's really
It's
interesting.
like this built-in drive for generosity.
So like it's almost like it's hardwired into us.
In a way, yeah. And this is where the sermon really emphasizes that giving should come from a joyful heart,
Okay, yeah.
not a sense of obligation. Remember the Israelites, they were bringing offerings freely and enthusiastically.
Oh, right.
It wasn't like, ugh, I got to go
Mhm.
do this. It was a celebration.
That makes a lot of sense. Have you ever, felt pressure to give to something?
Oh, yeah, of course.
And you're like, yeah, I don't know about this.
Yeah. And it just doesn't feel good, does it?
Not at all. You're not really invested in it.
Right. True giving is about wanting to contribute, not feeling forced.
Exactly. And, that kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying earlier about it being more than just money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's another key point from the sermon. Giving goes way beyond just the financial, right?
Right.
Instead of just writing a check, you can volunteer your skills, mentor someone,
Yeah.
even just using your talents to make someone's day a little brighter.
Right. So really thinking outside the box in terms of what giving even looks like.
Exactly. It's about dedicating your time, your talents, your energy. It's a much broader view.
Yeah, I like that. That really opens up the idea of giving. It makes it so anyone can participate,
Right.
no matter their financial situation.
Doesn't matter how much is in your bank account.
Right, exactly. And that makes me think about, that story in the Bible, the widow's mite.
Oh, yeah. Powerful story.
She gives her last 2 coins,
Yeah.
which, in the grand scheme of things, may not have seemed like much,
Right.
but it was everything she had.
It was a huge sacrifice.
It was. And the sermon actually uses that story to emphasize that point.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how even these seemingly small contributions can have a huge impact.
Right.
Think of today's world, the power of like crowdfunding or grassroots movements.
Yeah.
People coming together, giving what they can, whether it's $1 or an hour of their time,
Yeah.
and achieving these amazing things.
I love that. And I also love how the sermon connects giving with this idea of trusting in God's provision.
Oh, yeah. That's a powerful connection.
Because it really is like this leap of faith,
It is.
Like believing that even when you give generously, you'll be taken care of.
And it really speaks to, the difference between an abundance mentality and a scarcity mindset.
Totally.
Right. If you believe there's only so much to go around, you're going to hold on tight.
Oh, yeah, you're going to hoard it.
Exactly.
Mm.
But if you trust there's enough for everyone and that, the universe will provide,
Yeah.
then giving becomes less about loss and more about sharing the wealth, sharing the abundance.
It's like, are we holding on for dear life or are we opening our hands?
It really is. And it makes you wonder, how much more would we give if we truly believed we'd be taken care of?
That's such a good question. And it really challenges us to look at our own beliefs.
It does. It forces us to ask, do I really believe there's enough?
Yeah. This sermon is already really making me think, and we're just getting started.
Right. We've just touched on giving as a response to blessings,
Right.
how it's more than just money, and even that powerful connection between giving and trusting God's provision.
That's right. And there's still so much more to explore.
Oh, yeah. We've just scratched the surface.
It's like this sermon has opened the door to a whole new way of thinking about giving.
Exactly. It's like, wait a minute, I thought I knew what giving was all about.
Right. But it's so much deeper than we realize.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a really practical question.
Yeah. What's that?
What does it actually look like to live out these principles?
Ooh, good question.
That's what we're going to dive into in part 2, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the heart of giving.
Yeah, this is great.
So, we've been looking at all these different aspects of giving, like seeing it as a response to blessings, and how it's not just about finances,
Right, right.
and that whole idea of trusting in God's provision, which is, phew, that's a big one.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm curious about this part of the sermon where they talk about everything we have, our time, our talents, our energy, it's all a gift from God.
Yeah, they really hit on that.
So what does that actually mean for us? Like, what does that look like practically?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting because, the sermon doesn't give us like step-by-step instructions on how to give like Christ.
Yeah.
But I actually think that's a good thing
Oh.
because instead, it really challenges us to consider the heart behind Christ's giving.
So it's not just about the actions themselves.
Exactly. It's about, his selflessness, his compassion, his love for humanity. It's more like, don't just copy what he did, understand ouch why he did it.
Yeah, that's a powerful distinction. Like, instead of just going through the motions, we need to actually align our hearts with Christ's heart.
Right.
It really makes you think, if we could see the world through that lens of love and compassion, how would our actions change?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great question because it's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking, okay, if I donate this much or I volunteer this many hours, I'm good.
Like checking off the boxes.
Exactly. But the sermon really pushes us to go deeper because if everything we have is a gift, that changes how we see all of our possessions, our resources.
So it's not just about how much we give, it's about how we view everything we have.
Right. It's like we become stewards,
Stewards, I like that word.
It implies this responsibility. Like we're entrusted with managing these blessings for a purpose.
Not just for ourselves, right?
Exactly. It's not just about accumulating more and more stuff. It's about using what we have to actually make a difference. The pastor said something that really stuck with me. He said, God prospers us not to raise our standard of living, but to raise our standard of giving.
Wow. Now that is a radical idea, especially in today's world.
It is. It really flips the script on that whole consumerist mindset, where it's all about getting more, more, more.
Yeah, like that's the goal.
Right. But here, it's about looking at the impact of our choices and how we can use what we already have to make a difference. It's like, instead of always striving for more, what if we focused on sharing what we already have?
And it doesn't have to be some huge, grand gesture, right?
No, not at all. Remember, the sermon also talked about the joy of giving.
Oh, right.
It's not about the size of the gift, it's about the heart behind it.
That's so true. Even thinking about those times I've given something small, but it was from a place of genuine care and how much joy it brought to the other person.
Exactly. And to you. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is. And, it makes me think about the story of the widow and her two mites again.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the amount of money. It was about her giving everything she had.
A powerful example, especially
Yeah.
for those of us who feel like we don't have a lot to give.
Yeah, we all have something. Going back to that idea of trusting God's provision.
Yeah.
Honestly, that can be a really scary thought.
Oh, for sure. It's like taking this leap of faith, like saying, even if I give this away, I trust that somehow it'll all work out.
Yeah.
It really is an act of surrender, letting go of our need to control everything. And honestly, that can be incredibly liberating.
Letting go. Oh, that's a tough one.
It is. It's about shifting that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
Mm.
Believing there's enough to go around and that the universe will provide.
Okay, but practically speaking, how do we actually do that? Like, I know I struggle with that sometimes.
We all do. It's so easy to get caught up in worrying about having enough, especially these days.
Yeah, and then I start to think, well, maybe I shouldn't give so much.
Right, and you start to hold back.
Exactly. But the sermon also talked about giving cheerfully, not reluctantly, right?
Yes. It shouldn't feel like this burden.
And I've definitely been in situations where I felt pressured to give, and it just didn't feel right.
Yeah, it loses that genuineness, that heart connection that makes giving so
It
powerful.
becomes a transaction instead of an expression of love.
Exactly. And that brings us back to, what we were saying before about aligning our hearts with God's heart.
That's right, because the pastor also said that giving can bring us closer to the heart of God. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, God is the ultimate giver, right? The source of all blessings. Yeah. So when we give freely and joyfully, we're reflecting that nature, like we're participating in that divine flow of abundance.
And that's what brings us closer to him.
It's about aligning ourselves with the very heart of love and generosity. Remember, the sermon also talked about how giving shapes our character. It's
Right.
like it molds us into the image of Christ.
So giving doesn't just change what we do, it changes who we are.
Exactly. You start to cultivate these amazing qualities: empathy, compassion, selflessness. It's like by practicing generosity, we actually become more generous people. It's a process of transformation.
That's really powerful. But I think sometimes we can get caught up in the idea of giving because we think we'll get something back in return.
Yeah, it's tempting, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we hear stories about people being blessed materially because of their giving.
So we're like, okay, if I give this, then God will give me that.
Exactly. It's a transactional mindset. But remember, the sermon really challenged us to go beyond that.
To focus on the intrinsic reward.
Exactly. To find the joy and fulfillment that come from acting in alignment with our values, with our beliefs, the positive impact we have on others, the growth we experience ourselves. Those are the real blessings.
It's about recognizing that the act of giving itself is the reward.
Right. It brings us back to that idea of aligning ourselves with God's heart, with that flow of abundance.
And recognizing that we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves, like we're all connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just about me, it's about us.
That's a great point, and it makes me think about this question. How does all of this giving, all of this generosity, how does it shape our understanding of our purpose?
Ooh, that is a great question. And it's the perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking about this idea of giving,
Yeah.
and it's been really interesting to unpack it, beyond just the money.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea from the sermon that giving can actually give you us purpose.
Right.
That's what I really want to dig into.
Yeah.
Because it seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does. It's like you think, okay, if I want to feel fulfilled, I need to get things from myself.
Right.
But here they're saying you find fulfillment by contributing to something larger.
So it's like flipping the script.
It's shifting from me to we.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of looking at it.
So instead of always asking, what's in it for me?
Right.
You start asking, how can I contribute?
How can I make a difference?
Yeah, like how can I use what I have to make things better?
Exactly. And, the sermon really emphasized this point that the resources we have,
Yeah.
our talents, our time, our energy, they're not just for our own enjoyment.
So it's not all about me.
Right. It's about using those things to make a positive impact. Like we're called to be active participants.
Not just sitting on the sidelines watching.
Exactly. It's about engaging with life fully.
And using our gifts to serve others.
Yeah. And when you do that, you tap into this wellspring of purpose
Oh, okay.
that goes way beyond just your own personal goals.
Like it gives your life a whole new dimension.
It does a sense of direction you might not find otherwise.
It's so easy to get caught up in the material stuff,
Oh, yeah?
especially when we're constantly being told we need more.
Wow.
But the sermon really challenged that.
Yeah, they talked about how giving helps us keep our focus on God, not on possessions.
It's like it shifts our priorities.
It reminds us what really matters.
So instead of always wanting more stuff,
Right.
we can find fulfillment in something deeper.
It's about detaching from those materialistic desires.
And trusting that our needs will be met even as we give generously.
Exactly. It takes a lot of faith.
It does, because it's like, okay, I'm letting go of this need to control,
Uh-huh.
and I'm trusting in something bigger.
It's a huge shift in mindset, moving from scarcity to abundance, from fear to faith.
Yeah, that's powerful. And honestly, it can be really scary.
It can be, but it's also incredibly liberating.
I can see that.
When you let go of that need to hoard and control, you open yourself up to true freedom, generosity.
It's like you're making space for something new to come in.
Exactly.
This sermon also talked about giving as an expression of gratitude.
Oh, yeah.
Like saying thank you to God for all that we've been given.
Right. It's like, here's a way I can share these blessings with others.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
It becomes an act of worship.
Not just a transaction.
Yeah, a humble acknowledgement that everything we have is a gift.
And when we give from that place of gratitude,
It changes everything.
It's like we're creating this ripple effect of goodness.
Contributing to a cycle of blessing and abundance.
I love that, as we're wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
Well, I hope they remember this. If everything we have is a gift, then how we use those gifts.
Okay.
It really reflects our values, our beliefs, and ultimately our love.
So it's not just about the stuff, it's about what's in our hearts.
Exactly. Giving isn't just about transactions. It's about transformation.
Transforming ourselves, our communities,
Hmm.
the world.
That's it.
Wow, that's a powerful thought to end on.
Yeah.
So, if you've been listening to this and you're feeling inspired,
Uh-huh.
I encourage you to really think about what this means for you. What gifts have you been given?
Hmm.
And how can you use those gifts to make a difference?
It's a question worth asking.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of giving.
Yeah, this was great.
And we'll see you next time.